The day the bridge was torn apart, I didn't argue. I didn't protest. I just watched as heavy equipment chewed through what the HOA claimed was my illegal structure. Neighbors gathered, fines were issued, and one woman smiled like she'd finally won. What no one realized was that every plank they destroyed was being recorded, documented, and quietly approved by someone far above her authority. I let the HOA feel powerful because power has a way of collapsing when the truth surfaces. The real question was never whether the bridge would survive, it was whether she would. Before the bridge became a battleground, life in the neighborhood was quiet in the way that feels carefully controlled. The kind of place where lawns were trimmed to identical lengths, mailboxes followed exact measurements, and the illusion of harmony depended on everyone staying in line. I had moved there for peace, not perfection. I worked long hours, kept to myself, and used the small wooden bridge near my property as nothing more than a convenience, a simple crossing over a drainage channel that had existed long before I arrived. The bridge wasn't new, and it wasn't flashy. It blended into the landscape, unnoticed by most residents and ignored for years. It made daily routines easier and never caused problems. For a long time, no one questioned it, and I assumed no one ever would. That changed when the HOA leadership shifted. New faces appeared on committees, and suddenly rules felt less like guidelines and more like weapons. Notices began appearing on doors. Measurements were taken. Photos were snapped from sidewalks. What had once been a calm community started feeling like a place under surveillance. One person, in particular, seemed obsessed with enforcement. She wasn't content with compliance, she wanted control. Every infraction, real or imagined, became a chance to assert authority. And eventually, her attention landed on the bridge. At first, it was framed as a simple concern. Then it became a violation. Then a demand. The bridge, I was told, did not belong there. It was unsafe. It was unauthorized. It was my responsibility. What none of them knew, what I didn't correct, was that the bridge wasn't mine at all. And letting them believe it was would turn out to be the most important decision I made. Once the bridge was labeled a violation, everything accelerated. Notices began arriving with alarming regularity, each one more severe than the last. What started as a vague warning quickly transformed into formal citations, complete with deadlines and penalties. The language was cold and absolute, leaving no room for discussion or explanation. The bridge had been judged guilty, and by extension, so had I. Inspections followed. HOA representatives appeared unannounced, walking the perimeter with clipboards and phones, documenting the structure from every angle. They measured distances that had never mattered before and referenced rules that seemed to shift depending on who was enforcing them. The bridge was suddenly described as a safety hazard, an obstruction, a liability to the community. Each claim felt exaggerated, yet confidently delivered, as if repetition alone could make it true. Fines were added next. Not crippling at first, but constant. Small enough to feel insulting, frequent enough to feel threatening. Every missed deadline triggered another notice. Every notice carried a new consequence. The pressure was deliberate, designed to exhaust, to intimidate, to force compliance without resistance. And through it all, the same name appeared at the bottom of every document, the same authority figure signing off with absolute certainty. Neighbors noticed. Some avoided eye contact. Others watched quietly from behind curtains, relieved that the attention wasn't on them. A few offered sympathetic nods but kept their distance, unwilling to draw the HOA's focus. The sense of isolation grew heavier with each passing week. This was no longer about a bridge, it was about dominance. The HOA escalated again, announcing that corrective action would be taken if I failed to comply. The phrasing was vague on purpose. It hinted at forced removal, legal action, and additional fees without stating specifics. The threat hovered, undefined but unmistakable. The bridge, they claimed, violated community standards and would be dealt with accordingly. What made the situation more unsettling was how confidently wrong they were. Documents were cited, rules were quoted, and authority was asserted without hesitation. It became clear that accuracy didn't matter, only control did. The bridge had become a symbol, a test case, a way to prove that resistance was futile. Heavy machinery was scheduled. Notices informed me of the date and time when the violation would be resolved. There was no request for consent, no attempt at compromise. Just an announcement. The decision had been made, and the outcome was already written in their minds. I didn't stop them. I didn't argue publicly. I didn't submit appeals or demand hearings. Instead, I observed. I saved every letter, logged every fine, and documented every inspection. Each action taken by the HOA added another layer to a record they never suspected was being built against them. The day the equipment arrived, it felt less like enforcement and more like a spectacle. The bridge was dismantled piece by piece, right in front of the community. What had once been ignored for years was now treated like a dangerous eyesore that needed immediate eradication. And with every plank removed, the HOA's confidence grew. But beneath that confidence was a critical assumption that the bridge was mine to destroy. What they didn't know was that every step they took crossed a boundary far beyond HOA jurisdiction. Permits they never checked. Ownership records they never questioned. Authority they never actually had. And as the final remnants of the bridge disappeared, the groundwork for something far bigger had already been laid. Because once the bridge was gone, the consequences would no longer be optional. The turning point came quietly, without warnings or raised voices. An official notice arrived, not from the HOA, but from the county. It listed the bridge as public infrastructure and documented its unauthorized destruction in precise, unforgiving language. The timing was brutal. The same HOA officer who had ordered the demolition was suddenly required to explain why community funds had been used to destroy county property. Records were pulled. Emails were reviewed. Decisions once made with confidence were now exposed under scrutiny they couldn't control. The certainty vanished. Meetings grew tense. Authority dissolved into panic. What had been framed as enforcement became negligence, then liability. And as the realization spread that the bridge had never belonged to me at all, the power dynamic collapsed in full view of the community. The HOA had won the battle they imagined, but triggered a reckoning they never saw coming. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was impossible to ignore. The county demanded full restoration at the HOA's expense, along with penalties that drained the association's reserve funds. Insurance refused to cover what had been labeled unauthorized destruction, and suddenly the same board that had enforced fines so aggressively was facing legal fees of its own. The compliance chair stepped down quietly, her authority reduced to a cautionary tale whispered at neighborhood gatherings. The bridge was rebuilt stronger, officially marked, and undeniably public. And the community changed with it. Meetings grew less hostile. Rules were questioned instead of blindly enforced. Because power without verification is just arrogance waiting to be exposed. And sometimes, the smartest move isn't to fight back loudly, it's to let overconfidence dig its own grave.
Power always feels permanent, until the truth steps in. Thank you for watching this story. If it kept you hooked, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.